Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching The World Report. Now on NewsX World, we'll start as always with a check of the top headlines. A Ukrainian delegation heads to the US for talks on security guarantees and a post-war recovery package. President Zelensky says Kyiv needs up to $800 billion and hopes to sign key documents at Davos. The White House announces a US-led board of peace to oversee temporary governance in Gaza as deadly violence continues despite a fragile ceasefire. The board includes Marco Rubio, Steve Witkoff, Tony Blair, and Jared Kushner, with President Trump serving as chair. Residents say Iran's deadly crackdown has largely quelled protests as state media reports more arrests. President Trump claims Iran halts planned executions, though Tehran makes no official confirmation. Reza Pahlavi calls on the world to help oust Iran's Islamic Republic and target Revolutionary Guard leaders. Iran's security forces appear to have suppressed the nationwide protests after more than 3,000 deaths, rights groups say. Syria's President Ahmed al-Shara formally recognizes Kurdish language rights and restores citizenship to all Kurdish Syrians. The decree follows deadly Aleppo clashes that killed 23 and displaced over 150,000 before Kurdish forces withdraw. Uganda's army denies claims that opposition leader Bobi Wine is abducted by military helicopter after the election. His party maintains he is forcibly removed from his home as authorities reject the allegations. Myanmar's military-backed USDP widens its lead after the second round of voting. Official figures show the party is set to win 182 of 330 seats as the election enters its final phase amid conflict. The U.S. Justice Department investigates Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey over alleged obstruction of ICE operations. The probe follows the fatal shooting of Rennie Good by an ICE agent, which triggered protests in Minneapolis. All right, we now start with the top news from Iran, where Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has declared that authorities must crack down on the seditionists amid ongoing protests in the country. In a strong stance against the demonstrators, Khamenei also accused US President Donald Trump of being guilty for the casualties during the unrest. He further asserted that the US seeks to achieve military, political, and economic domination over Iran. These remarks come as tension remains high following the outbreak of protests triggered by economic struggles and dissatisfaction with the government. I request Dan Perry to join us in the discussion, but before that, there's some more information that we'd like to give you. Viewers, unrest in Iran has led to significant destruction, with over 50 mosques and 180 ambulances set on fire. And according to the Iranian embassy in Russia, in Tehran alone, 26 banks and 25 mosques were destroyed. The protests, which began on December 29 following the plummeting value of the Iranian rial, spread across the country, leading to the deaths of 40 law enforcement officers. Iranian officials have accused the US and Israel of inciting the violence, while armed groups reportedly infiltrated the protests. All right, I now request Dan Perry, international affairs expert from Tel Aviv, to join me in this discussion. Dan, thank you very much for joining me. My question, first one, is very simple. What's next for Khamenei? He's now a marked man. Can he just simply sit outside and carry on as he did?
That's been a pattern for the past 47 years of Iranian theocratic dictatorship. Whenever there have been rounds of violence, the regime eventually succeeds in suppressing the protesters with sufficient killing and arresting and basically massacring the protesters. So the pattern has been that they suppress rounds of protest with violence. It appeared to be different this time because the Iranian regime seems weaker in a variety of ways. They are humiliated by having been somewhat thrashed by Israel and then the US in the June 12-day war. Their economy is in a perhaps unprecedentedly desperate situation. The rial has collapsed since June by about 50%. There's real anger at the government, and their whole regional chaos project has been falling apart because their proxies have been significantly weakened. There was a sense that given all this, maybe this time it could be different. Also because the U.S. Has a leadership right now that is unpredictable and may be less cautious. If they sensed blood and they felt that there was a win here potentially for the West by bringing down the regime. Last week, Trump suggested as much by urging protesters to take over their institutions and to continue protesting, saying in big capital letters in a tweet, help is on its way. But he seems to have backed down. That could be a misdirection. They could be only pretending to have backed down. The result so far has been a great degree of economic dislocation in the region. Flights have been canceled, troops have been moved, tourists have been asked to leave. Business in some places has been badly disrupted, all because of the anticipation of what could be a war that could escalate very quickly if Iran then goes and attacks Israel, which they basically said they would. And yet nothing has happened. So if Trump really does back down, it's quite possible that Khamenei is betting correctly that he can eventually suppress the protests with enough violence. On the other hand, there's another scenario where this is not allowed to continue and the U.S. takes action.
All right, Dan, let's also talk about the fact that it was only earlier today that Trump had thanked Iran for, stopping the executions and for the protests coming down. And then Khamenei goes on and issues this statement accusing Trump and Israel of fueling the unrest. Not just that, but also for the killings of the demonstrators. How do you see these statements and the timings that they have been issued?
Khamenei is playing a very dangerous game. It's conceivable that Trump is willing to let him off the hook if a narrative can be built where, because of Trump's intervention and threats, the killing really stopped. You see Trump saying, well, the killing stopped. Obviously, he's taking credit for it. And from his perspective, that may be sufficient to move on to the next crisis, real or manufactured. But remember that Khamenei has a real advantage here in that Trump, unlike previous U.S. presidents, is not a promoter of democracy. The American National Security Strategy, released last month, basically bins decades of bipartisan consensus in America that the U.S. should be promoting democracy and therefore would be a natural enemy of the Iranian Islamic Republic and would be seeking regime change. Trump doesn't care about democracy. He cares about appearing to register wins. He cares about looking tough. He cares about claiming he stopped wars he did not stop. It's very different from Trump if you can help him build a narrative that he can sell to credulous supporters as a win. Khamenei is playing a very dangerous game in issuing these bellicose statements. It may be that he misunderstands the advantage that he can tap if only he let Trump take his win. And so if he keeps embarrassing Trump with statements as he has today, I think the tables may turn yet again.
All right, Sean. Dan, thanks for your assessment of the situation, but stay on with us. Moving ahead, viewers, let's cover some news on now Greenland, where U.S. Democratic Senator Chris Coons has ruled out any pressing security threats to Greenland. While visiting Copenhagen with a bipartisan delegation, Coons emphasized shared concerns over Arctic security. He noted the impact of climate change, changing sea ice, and shifting shipping routes as driving forces for security discussions. However, he made it clear that Greenland's status remains under Danish sovereignty and any U.S. involvement would need to be done in partnership with both Greenland and Denmark. Coons also reaffirmed the U.S.'s commitment to NATO alliance and respect for Danish sovereignty. Let's listen in.
The conversations we've had have reinforced a few simple points. One is that for 225 years, the United States has been blessed to have a good and loyal and trusted ally and partner in the Kingdom of Denmark. There are no pressing security threats to Greenland, but we share real concern about Arctic security going forward. As the climate changes, as the sea ice retreats, as shipping routes change, there are legitimate reasons for us to explore ways to invest better in Arctic security broadly, both in the American Arctic and in our NATO partners and allies. As an original NATO ally, Denmark has been a tremendous partner for us in security, and that relationship is rooted in deeply shared values, values of democracy, of self-determination, and of respect for territorial integrity. That if the United States seeks to invest in partnership respectfully with the people of Greenland in accessing possibly newly available critical minerals or rare earths, that would be welcome, and that in partnership with the Kingdom of Denmark, if we wish to increase our investments in Arctic security, that would be welcome. But the challenge here is for that to be done in a way that is deeply respectful of Danish sovereignty and of our NATO alliance.
All right, Dan continues to stay with us. Dan, please join us back in the discussion. Okay, thanks for staying on, Dan. Now, of course, the U.S. congressional delegation has tried to assuage some of the concerns, but the question of sovereignty is of primary concern to Greenlanders. How will the U.S. be able to address that?
Oh, there's no way to address it in any way that avoids damage without Trump stepping down from his threats. It is an absolute global historic emergency. It's a complete outrage that the U.S. president is repeating that the U.S. must acquire ownership of and sovereignty over Denmark by any means available, ruling out no means, refusing to rule out the use of force. Basically, you have Trump threatening a NATO ally, an excellent NATO ally, Denmark, that has had control over Greenland for years, effectively with military force, with a possible invasion. Can you imagine what Xi in China and Putin in Russia are thinking when they see the devastating unraveling of the NATO alliance? They are obviously going to be tempted to take action in Taiwan, in the Baltics. Putin may want to deal a coup de grace to Ukraine. This could lead to major global disruptions. So obviously, when you have normal senators from both parties, as we heard today, trying to assuage concerns in Denmark, you're going to hear reasonable reflections of these fears.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the U.S. is led by Trump.
Yeah.
And Trump seems to have an obsession with acquiring Greenland. And I don't think that this will easily go away. It's very useful, extremely useful, that you're starting to hear voices from the Republican branch of the House and the Senate. Voices like Lisa Murkowski, Roger Wicker, the chair of the Armed Services Committee, basically suggesting they would break with Trump. Trump has to fear that 12, 15 U.S. senators might join the Republicans to achieve the 2/3 majority in the Senate in removing him from office. A major issue is the November election. The November election cuts two ways. One, because Trump is insisting on policies that are so unpopular, and polls show that barely 1 out of 6 Americans want to have anything to do with the aggression towards Greenland, that could hurt the Republicans in the midterm elections. And if he loses control over the House and the Senate, then he becomes very much of a lame duck. And the number of Republicans that would be needed to convict him after the Senate impeaches him and remove him from office would also decrease. He may fear removal from office by the Senate if he continues this way, given what we're hearing from senators that are Republican. The Republicans have proven basically invertebrate until now. They've proven to be willing to put up with almost any madness from Trump, and we are seeing the early signs of a possible change. It's conceivable that if those voices continue, then Trump may back down. But it's extremely dangerous because we're basically talking about the calculations and the whims of one man.
All right, Dan, thanks very much then for joining me in this discussion. We now move ahead. Viewers, Turkey has said that US President Donald Trump has invited Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to join the so-called Board of Peace that will oversee post-war in Gaza. Turkish Presidential Communication Director Burhanettin Durhan has said that Erdogan has received the proposal in a letter sent by Donald Trump inviting him to become a founding member of the board. Meanwhile, Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati has said that Egypt is reviewing an invitation by Trump to Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to join the so-called Board of Peace for Gaza. The board is set to supervise the temporary governance of Gaza, which has been under a fragile ceasefire since October. I have Shruti Dasgupta, Foreign Affairs expert from New Delhi, joining me in this discussion. Shruti, thanks for joining us. We all know that Turkey has long supported Gaza. Trump's invitation to Turkey for this so-called Board of Peace, what does that really mean about his vision of Middle East that we have
It
traditionally
shouldn't surprise
known?
any one of us because the foreign minister of Turkey is already part of the executive board, if I'm not wrong. So Turkey already has representation and voice in what happens to Gaza and Gazans at that particular strip of land in the days to come. This is just Trump's way of ensuring that all the key players that could have objections, could raise international as well issues, as well as those who might, kind of instigate trouble against the Gaza peace plan, are part of the Gaza peace plan, so that their voices, they are kind of in the loop of things, rather than on the outside making noise. So Turkey has been given their piece of pie already. And this is just by inviting Erdogan, we should not be surprised. He needs Middle Eastern players there. There's already the Qatari representation there. There is already Egyptian representative there. There are lots of Middle East nations, all of whom will support Gaza, but have somehow made peace with USA, already part of that entire executive board or NCAG or some other level of the Gaza peace plan. This entire peace plan moving towards its second tier now, where they're going to start implementing the harder things like the withdrawal of the military, the actions that are going to happen there. So the second tier plan is now supposed to go forth after he's invited all the people and made all the right noises. So this is where it is. Of course, there are controversial figures like Tony Blair and Jared Kushner, who Tony Blair has been accused by a lot of these people as a criminal, international criminal, for what for his support of the Iraq war. So that is a controversy that is already brewing there. People already side-eye that particular appointment. Jared Kushner, apart from being a relative of Trump, has personal business interests, and he was also one of the few people who were championing the Riviera plan. So having him part of the executive board, mind you, there's a hierarchical structure there. So there's a board of peace where there are heads of states, and the topmost position, of course, belongs to Trump. And then there's this executive board where there is Jared Kushner, and then there's this man, I'm forgetting his name. He's been appointed as the overseer of things. And then there is the NCAG, which has the technocrats there of Palestinian Authority. They are not in any other administrative position. So the Gazans are the last in the tier of, the Palestinians or Gazans are last in the tier of authority. And the plans are just moving forth as per the convenience of USA and Israel, rather than what is required on ground.
What about Egypt? Trump has also always supported Egypt in other conflicts as well. With its inclusion, what does Egypt's inclusion mean?
Well, Trump needs Egypt because Egypt shares border both with Gaza as well as Israel. Egypt has always stood very, very firmly on the side of Israel and have not allowed any of the Gazans to cross forth, no matter how bad the war went, through the Rafah crossings or any of the other crossings. This also leads us to the second part of what is happening there. He's again making those noises about ending the conflict of the Nile River, and he's speaking on behalf of Egypt against Ethiopia, against the GARD. So he's making sure that the players in this entire game for Middle East are all happy. He's making sure Egypt is happy with him, so they are there, they're part of this entire plan because they need to be. They're actually the ones who will be there holding the guns, holding the fort, ensuring that there is no spillage of refugees. They'll be there as foot soldiers for Trump and his peace plans. They'll be there supporting Israel. He's pleasing Turkey because they have stake in the game. He's keeping Qatar there because that's where the money is coming for all of this. So the Riviera plan cannot go through without the World Bank giving loans. So the World Bank is a member of all of this. It's a bigger game that we are seeing in the name of diplomacy with the head of Trump, with Trump as the head of things.
All right, Shruti, then thanks very much for speaking to us and joining us in this discussion. With that, viewers, let's cover some news on the Russia-Ukraine war, where Russian air defenses have now downed 99 Ukrainian drones overnight, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. The drones were intercepted across several regions, including 29 in Belgorod, 12 in Kursk, and 47 over the Black Sea. Additional drones were shot down in the Rostov, Astrakhan, and Crimea regions, and one over the Sea of Azov. Meanwhile, the Defense Ministry confirmed that air defense systems were active from 2000 GMT to 4 GMT. In retaliation to these attacks, Russia has also conducted precision strikes targeting military facilities and Ukraine's defense industry. And as always, we end the bulletin with some technology news. Now, database provider ClickHouse has secured $400 million in new funding, propelling its valuation to a formidable $15 billion. This achievement represents a significant 2.5-fold increase from its previous valuation of $6.35 billion recorded last May. The substantial investment underscores strong market confidence in the company's trajectory and technological capabilities. ClickHouse positions itself as a direct challenger to established giants like Snowflake and Databricks within the critical arena of AI data processing. Its database software is engineered to handle the massive data sets essential for modern artificial intelligence applications. The company's growth strategy is clearly focused on capturing a larger share of this rapidly expanding market. That's all we have time for. Do keep watching NewsX World for all international news and updates.